Many people want to know how I motivate my child to read. I'm Nicolene Peck, and I'm an educator. I teach self-government and parenting relationships, and you know what? I've actually homeschooled a lot of children too, taught them all how to read. In this video, we're going to be talking about how you can teach your child to read too. Many people ask me how to motivate my child to read. So I've taught many children how to read and motivated some really avid readers. I'm Nicolene Peck. I'm a parenting expert, relationship expert, and I love the topic of education. So we're going to be talking about motivating children to read in this video. I have taught so many children how to read, and as a homeschool mother, I have motivated my children to read on a daily basis. In fact, my children were very avid readers. So I've got a great list for you today for things that you can do to motivate your children to read no matter where they happen to be going to school. Number one is read yourself. If you are not a reader, it's going to be kind of silly to assume that they become readers. I know we want them to learn those skills, but you've got to show them that you are still enjoying the skill development of reading, that you're gaining something from it. So read things in front of them. When they wake up in the morning, are you reading something worthwhile? And then do you tell them maybe sometimes about the things that you're reading? Do you discuss and narrate with them the ideas that you're processing as you're going through the great things in your lap? The next thing that you want to do is you want to read to them. So oftentimes we think, okay, my child does not want to pick up a book on their own and read it. Well, maybe they need more time reading with you. If you are reading to them and you're reading in front of them, then it's a very natural progression that over time they will want to read to themselves. It will become part of their lives. In fact, we need to be very careful that we do not spend all of our free time and our evenings focusing on media. Sometimes we say, let's get our reading done so that we can watch TV or watch this movie. Well, then what does that tell the child the most important thing is? The TV or the movie? When in reality, you want them to gain learning and confidence from that reading. So instead, have some of that downtime, some of that fun family time be reading together as a family. My daughter recently married a guy who was raised in a home where the dad read to the family all the time. In fact, almost nightly. And so as they were dating, he said, "Can I read to you?" My daughter was blown away. She loved reading. She'd never met a guy who wanted to read to her for fun. It is a fun thing. And back in the old days, that's what people did for leisure in the evenings. We maybe are falling into a rut with all of the media that we're spending our nights with, and we're gypping our children from falling in love with reading. When you read to your children, be sure to discuss. Have them narrate to you or tell you the things that they're liking about what you're reading. As a homeschool mom, one thing that I did to help my children realize they were gaining cool stuff from the things that we were reading together and the things that they were reading themselves is after reading time, I would sit down and have them tell me what it was that they enjoyed about that thing that we read. Or after reading a paragraph or a page, I would say, "What do you think about what that father did, Pa Ingalls or something like that?" And they would tell me their deep thoughts about it. As time went by, I started to type out their thoughts word for word. So at the end of reading time together, I would take like 3 minutes, type them a paper and say, "Wow, you sure do know your stuff. Look at this paper you just wrote." And they would realize I'm a smart person. Sharing ideas is how I write things. When I read stuff, I learn stuff that then I can write down. Wow, I'm gaining knowledge and skills. So use that discussion time in a really powerful way. As far as your reading material goes, it's a super good idea to make sure you're always reading good stuff. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean popular stuff, although it can be popular sometimes. What I have found is that the best books, the ones that are truly transformational and that we can discuss for hours on end, are usually books that were written before 1970. Yep, that's right, the old stuff. Usually the books written before before 1970 were books that involved the entire family. They were books not about children hating each other, picking on each other, siblings having contention, attitude problems, and children pushing against their families, or just books in general where the family isn't even present in the person's life. Make sure that you pick things that relate to truths you want your children to know, because then their brains and their understanding of the world is going to expand even further. So pick good stuff. In our family, we call this good stuff classics. That doesn't mean it has to be way, way old, but it does have to be transformational. Before I get to my next items on my long list of things you can do to motivate your child to read, list some of your favorite books. Maybe some of you listening have had some books that have really hit home with the family. Put some of those books down in the comments so that people get some ideas of things they can try to motivate their family. Now, there are some amazing books that have a special treat attached to them, which is they have a movie. There were many books that my children wanted to read, but maybe they were a little bit outside of their level. For instance, the book The Hobbit. I remember when my son said, I want to read The Hobbit, but he wasn't quite up to that reading level yet. And I thought, I want him to read The Hobbit. I want his reading level to stretch, and I want him to see that he could read a harder book like that. So I said, okay, well, how about you read The Hobbit, and then after The Hobbit, I will allow you to see the movie The Hobbit. Now, in our family, we have a very strict movie policy, and so that wasn't a movie that I had allowed them to see before. And so he was very excited to be able to see a movie that he had not been able to see just because he read the book. I usually feel like if they've read the book, even if the movie has a slightly different rating, I mean, I'm going to skip parts that are really bad, of course, but this movie maybe was PG-13 because the action scenes were pretty intense. But if he's already been through the action scenes in his mind, then the action that he sees on the screen is not going to be shocking him. Also, he'll be able to pick out the things that were added into the movie that weren't part of the book, and chances are he'll probably be upset about the white orc. If you've not read the book, go read it and you'll know what I'm talking about. Another great thing that you can do to make all of that reading come alive, which is what is motivating about reading, it's not getting through the books that motivates a person. I mean, you can make a list of all the books you've read. To some people who love to see their accomplishments, that can be motivating, but usually people like to see something greater come of it. And one of those things that you can do is have projects associated with the books that you're reading. So what types of projects could you create for certain books that you may be reading? Let's say I'm reading the book Little House on the Prairie to my children, which is a great book for discussion. It's a history book, so they'll get in touch with a time in history. When they're learning like that, it matters. So many of the books nowadays, they're not even based on anything, so they're really not learning, they're just going through a bunch of dialogue. But not the Little House books. Let's say I'm reading that book and we get to that part in the book where Pa finds a honey treasure in the woods. So he notices an old log where there is a beehive and there's tons of honey in there, and he harvests that honey. Well, then I'm going to tell my children, how about we contact a beekeeper and see if we can go and tour their hives. We'll even wear bee suits and everything. We'll see how the bees work in the hives. We can even go and visit during a time where they are extracting the honey. Would you like to do that? My children are like, yes, we would totally love to do that. In fact, we loved to do it so much that after we did it one time, we ended up becoming beekeepers ourselves. Projects are super powerful. So be thinking in terms of what could we do to make this book come alive as you're reading to them and as they might be telling you about what they're reading. Another super motivating thing is reading groups or book discussion groups. In fact, even if your children did not read the book, bring them to the book discussion group and hear everybody else talk about the book. This will slowly, over time, motivate your child to finish more and more of the books that they start. They'll decide maybe they want to have something to contribute. In fact, even if you just read one chapter with them and they could contribute about that one chapter, they'll see the value of knowing the whole book so that they can even have more to say next time. In fact, it's super important after these book discussion groups that you discuss what they were able to contribute and maybe how they could find ways to contribute even more by reading the entire book. So book discussion groups, super motivating. That's why adults do them too. Adults want reasons to get through more books. So find inspiring other children or families, because you could have whole family book discussion groups that you could get together with so that your child has a peer group for reading. Another thing that you can do is you can set reading goals with your children. So there were times when my children would kind of get a little unmotivated to read. Maybe they were feeling a little bit burned out on a certain book, or they were at a slow part maybe in that book, and so they just didn't want to pick it up anymore. They wanted to get done with it faster. By the way, getting through books faster is absolutely more inspiring. So what we would do is we would sometimes set a reading goal, and we would say, you know, we've wanted to get that game that you wanted to play. Maybe it was the game Risk or something like that. And so how about we set a goal that if you can get this book done by such and such time, or as soon as you get this book done, we will go and we will get that game and learn how to play it. Or maybe if you can do this many pages a day or something like that, then we can go and we can get that game. Sometimes a little external motivation goes a long way. Speaking of motivation, if you understand the principles of self-government that I'm known for teaching all over the world, you know that I teach a lot of skills for self-mastery. One of those skills is following instructions. There's a 5-step process to that skill, and you can learn more about it at teachingselfgovernment.com. In fact, there are many skills that you can learn there. But with this skill, you can actually help your child become motivated too. In fact, if they know how to follow instructions when they're feeling like they just don't want to do it, you can look at them and say, I'm going to give you an instruction. Do you remember how to follow an instruction? Then they'll list the 5-step process and say, okay, here's your instruction. I need you to do your reading time for 15 minutes, okay? And then they can say, okay, and get it done. And if not, you can correct them for it. Obviously, we don't want to make reading time negative, but at the same time, if they run away from it enough, then they might never find the joy on the other side when they actually get the reading done and have learned something and have something important to discuss. Another thing that you can do, which some people feel a little bit of reservation about, is using audiobooks. So when you're driving in the car, use audiobooks, but don't forget the discussion part. Even if somebody else is doing the reading, make sure that you discuss what you're learning from that audiobook. Use your time to engage the brain and more learning all the time, and your child will crave engaging their brain on a regular basis. Also, when a child is having a hard time getting through a really long book, you could suggest doing the audiobook and following along so that their eyes are still getting the workout, they're hearing how the words should be pronounced within their own heads. This increases their vocabulary and sometimes their speed. Now, you're not going to want to keep them doing that forever and ever, but I have to admit that some of my children, even when they hit college, have said, you know what, sometimes just to get through something fast, I do the audiobook and follow along and highlight the key things, just so that I can get through it quicker while I'm doing other things at the same time. It is a skill to know how to use an audiobook and be able to retain information. So you can use audiobooks, but I know what you really want is for them to see the words, dissect the words, and process the ideas at a slower pace, which does mean that over time you've got to wean off those audiobooks as your primary way of reading. But they're always a good secondary way, especially if you're an auditory learner. If you have loved this video, then I know you're going to appreciate my next video, which is actually a full class that I am giving you. It's called The Expectation Trap versus the Cycle for Success. Click on the link to that class now and learn more things that you can do to change the hearts and minds in your home.